In the King James translation, it's rendered as, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." This text provides ambiguous evidence for the Trinity at best. The phrase that's translated as, "the Word was with God," uses ton theon for God. This is the definite form. The phrase that is translated as, "the Word was God," uses theos for God. This is the indefinite form. When a noun is in the indefinite form, it can be translated as an adjective. In fact, the actual phrase is "kathios hen ha logos." Word for word in English, this is, "and God was the Word." This allows it to be translated as, "the Word was God-like." For example, the Revised English Bible renders it, "In the beginning the Word already was, and the Word was in God's presence, and what God the Word was, and what God was, the Word was." One scholar explained it this way: in a case like this, we cannot do other than to go to the Greek, which is theos and halogos. Ha is the definite article, the, and it can be seen that there is a definite article with logos, but not with theos. When in Greek, two nouns are joined by the verb to be, and when both have the definite article, then one is fully intended to be identified with the other. But when one of them is without the article, it becomes more of an adjective than a noun, and describes rather the class or sphere to which the other belongs. An illustration from English will make this clear. If I say, "the preacher is the man," I use the definite article for both preacher and man, and I thereby identify the preacher with some quite definite individual man with whom I have in mind. But if I say, "the preacher is man," I have omitted the definite article before man, and what I mean is that the preacher must be classified as a man. He is in the same spheres of manhood. He is a human being. In the last clause of John 1:1, John has no article before theos, God. The Logos, therefore, is not identified as God or with God. The word theos has become adjectival and describes the sphere to which Logos belongs. We would therefore have to say that this means that the Logos belongs to the same sphere as God, without being identified with God. The Logos has the same kind of life and being as God. Here the NEB, New English Bible, finds the perfect translation. What God was, the Word was. And this is written by William Barclay in Jesus as They Knew Him. And I hope that, and it's actually from a Trinitarian author too. It's not someone that's arguing against the Trinity. He, in fact, continues on to argue that for a Trinitarian stance. But at least he's honest enough to say that the Greek does not actually say the Word was God. The Greek puts the Word in the same sphere as God. And that's really a lot of what I tried to show before in the way the Old Testament, talks about representatives of God are often identified as God in the Old Testament. For example, Moses. In Exodus chapter 7, verse 1, says, God said to Moses, "I make thee a god to Pharaoh." And then throughout the Old Testament, angels are often referred to as God. The people who see the angels often say, "I've seen God." So they're put kind of in the same spheres as God, having divine qualities, even though they aren't actually God. And those are clear examples where, especially Moses, there's absolutely no doubt that Moses was not a deity. But the Old Testament puts him in the same sphere as God, having divine authority in Exodus chapter 7, verse 1. And remember, Satan is the theos of this world, 2 Corinthians 4:4, in whom the God, theos of this world, hath blinded the minds of men, which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them. Remember, Christ is the image of God. That doesn't make him God any more than Adam was God, because even though Adam was made in the image of God. But Satan is referred to as God of this world. Is Satan a deity? No, absolutely not. But he has authority in this world. And that's what's referred to in 2 Corinthians 4:4. So just because something is in this category or sphere of theos in the Greek New Testament does not mean that they are actually God himself. Finally, remember that when God sent Moses to Pharaoh as his divine representative, it is very important to keep in mind in Exodus chapter 7, verse 1, "And the Lord said unto Moses, See, I have made thee a god to Pharaoh, and Aaron thy brother should be thy prophet." This is something most Christians have never read, or if they did, they never took time to actually look at it. A human being, someone who's clearly a human being, is not actually God, is referred to in the Old Testament as a god, by God himself. When God gave Moses divine authority, he referred to him as a god. So and this is the background from which the New Testament writers came from. So you cannot jump to a conclusion that just because a New Testament writer refers to Jesus, gives him divine qualities and such, that he is actually saying that he is God. That is not a conclusion that you can jump to when you keep in mind the Old Testament background, because a divine representative, who is clearly a human being, could legitimately be referred to as a god in the Old Testament. Someone from this background would interpret John 1:1 in a way that would fit the Old Testament. The most straightforward way to do that is to interpret it as saying the Word is like God, or the Word is God's representative to us. It would be very difficult for someone from this background to believe that this man, Jesus, the Word, is God in the flesh.